about.
But just to follow up for a second, is it really fair for you to expect AIPAC and the conference to be public debate forums? I mean, they're pro-Israel defense organizations. They're not forums for public debate, and they have their job to do, and then a lot of other groups have other jobs to do.
Well, what I would hope is that they would define pro-Israel defense in a different way, as defending Israel from threats from within as well as threats from without. To the degree that they don't, I hope they are supplanted by other organizations. But I think in the world in which we live now, they are by far the largest and most powerful organizations that most people know about when they deal with these issues. So we have to address them because the other institutions, by comparison, are tiny and relatively weak.
All the way in the back, there's a question. But you have to speak up.
Okay, I will. I want to just preface my question by saying that the Zionists sought statehood, not sainthood. And they sought statehood, not sainthood. And one of the things that concerns me is the prescription you're giving for resolving what you see as the problem among younger American Jews. I teach at UC Irvine, which is one of our very campuses where there's a lot of controversy. And what I found is twofold. One is that a lot of Jewish kids who were not particularly interested in Israel or not particularly Zionist or anything became extremely pro-Zionist and pro-Israel when they ran into the kind of really raw hatred and hostility towards Jews and the Jewish state. So it didn't cause a problem once whatever problems Israel may have internally didn't cause a problem because they understood the magnitude of the campaign against Israel. The second thing I would say is you would be amazed about how many young Jews who do support Israel, who don't care about it, really don't know anything about it. They're completely uninformed. And it is not clear to me how teaching about, and this is twofold, and I'll leave it with you, how teaching about Israel's flaws, rather than about its extraordinary accomplishments, is going to earn anyone's interest, number one. And number two, Israel is more than just facts on the ground. Like America's founding, it's an idea. And this idea of Jews being able to return home is, it's an extraordinary thing. And I don't see how teaching only of focusing so much on the problems is going to arouse anyone's support, especially if you underemphasize the whole Zionist ethos, which makes the kinds of problems, otherwise Israel's just like any other state, which I know is what they wanted, but that isn't what happened.
Thank you.
So how teaching the negative without making sure people are informed about truly an extraordinary accomplishment is going to draw young people to your side.
Perhaps I wasn't clear enough. I'm not suggesting that what we should do is simply send people to bash Israel. I think what we should do is send people to talk about what as I tried to say earlier, what an extraordinary accomplishment Israeli democracy is in a part of the world where there is very little democracy, in a state that has had to live under threat for so much of existence, to teach an admiration and even awe for what Israel has accomplished. But precisely because we stand in awe of what Israel has accomplished, because we care so much about it, that we are willing to defend it against threats both from without and from within, that we are not complacent about it, that we recognize that the rise of a man like Avigdor Lieberman to be the leader of Israel's third largest party, the rise of an ultra-Orthodox population that is in many ways quite hostile to liberal democratic values, that does represent a threat to the liberal democratic accomplishments of the state of Israel. It seems to me that's the message that I would want sent to younger American Jews, that they are, along with their Israeli cousins, custodians of that extraordinary set of accomplishments, and they need to protect it and defend it, not only against Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran, but also against the threats from within. And there are very substantial threats from within that have grown in part because of Israel's occupation of the West Bank since 1967. It seems to me that's the message that I would try to send.
Professor Landris.
It strikes me that there are two points that there are two axes that you're speaking to, and I want to ask you if I'm understanding you correctly, and then suggest that maybe the problem is bigger than, it's not only about Zionism and it's not only about America. One point is this question of public versus private consensus and disagreement. Whether or not we are properly contending with the radical change in what private and public have meant over the last 25 years. So what now looks public would have been private a generation ago, and I mean Facebook, and not just speaking to the government, but speaking anywhere. So that's one axis. The other axis strikes me is this question of accountability and self-investment. Whether or not we see Israel, and more broadly, the Jewish people, as us, or do we see it as some other? And I want to ask you whether you think those are the two nubs of the problem, and also ask you what can be done to increase the number of people of all generations, but increasingly of the younger generation, who do not see Jewish peoplehood as us, but see it as them.
There's a great series of questions. And I think your point about public and private is very interesting. And you're right. There probably is something of a cultural shift in which younger Americans, Jewish and non-Jewish, are simply take for granted a kind of public discourse about their own lives, about everything, that maybe an older generation did not. I also think the notion of private criticism but no public criticism, essentially, there's an element of elitism in this. I mean, who are the private critics who are going to have the opportunity to, in private, in closed-door sessions, communicate their concerns to the Israeli government? It's going to be a very, very small number of American Jewish leaders who can do that, or who even will be invited to go and sit at a meeting of some American Jewish organization and have a private conversation. For most people, they simply have the ability to write and speak and talk to the people around them and act as a citizen. So the opportunity for this private criticism that is not public may not really be very real for many average people, particularly younger people. And I think younger American Jews also are less likely to draw as clear, hard and fast a division between the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world. I think there's a tendency amongst older American Jews sometimes to be so fearful of and so distrustful of non-Jews that they want to keep things close to themselves. And that may be the function of not having many close non-Jewish friends growing up or that kind of thing. I think that doesn't really have meaning in a society that is so deeply integrated as our own, where there is, because of the sharp decline, let's face it, in anti-Semitism in the United States, the sharp decline in social segregation, a much greater willingness to basically be intimate and open with people across the religious divide. And in those contexts, the idea that you would only talk about Israel with your Jewish friends but not with your non-Jewish friends, I think runs counter to the lived experience and, in fact, the accomplishment of what America has become. On the